Welcome to this webinar. It's being presented by New Hampshire Housing. This is the first of a two-part presentation about design trends in multifamily housing pre and post-pandemic. I'm Rob Dappis. I'm the Managing Director of Management and Development for New Hampshire Housing. We provide financing to build affordable multifamily rental housing around the state, and we provide oversight for many of these properties. New Hampshire Housing is a self-sustaining public benefit corporation with a mission to promote, finance, and support affordable housing around the state of New Hampshire. Before we get into today's webinar and before I introduce today's presenters, I want to put a word in about the second part of this two-part program, and that's scheduled for next Wednesday. We're going to present another hour-long program on innovative multifamily design trends from the perspective of three regional professionals. Those three regional professionals are Kendra Halliwell of Icon Architecture in Boston, Rebecca Hatfield of Avesta Housing, and James Peterson of Peterson Engineering in Portsmouth. So if you haven't met Kendra and Rebecca and James, or if you have, in either case, I encourage you to join us for that conversation. I think you'll find it really interesting and stimulating. Each of the three of them will talk about some of the most important things that they see happening in multifamily design, engineering, development, and then we'll have some moderated discussion and Q&A about the intersection of their various areas of expertise. Today's presentation, as it says in the chat there, is being recorded, and so we'll share links with you tomorrow. To give you an idea of how today's program will run, our presenters today will do three kind of mini presentations of about 10 minutes each, and after each one, we're going to do a short question and answer session. Please enter your questions into the chat box, and I will moderate and we'll answer as many as we can, as many as time allows. I'm going to try to advance my slides here, and I trust that somebody will let me know if it doesn't work. So at this point, you may be asking yourself, how does New Hampshire Housing provide such great content for free? Well, this is how. These are our sponsors, and we just want to thank Craig Deachman and Associates, which is our main series sponsor and is also our general counsel and provides invaluable service to us. Additionally, RBC Capital Markets, an active tax credit syndicator in New Hampshire, and TD Bank provide important support that allows us to provide this kind of programming for free. I also want to say a quick thank you to our board of directors, all volunteers, a very hardworking board appointed by the governor who support our efforts in this area. And I also, although this is not in the script that Grace gave me, I want to say a quick thank you to Grace Lessner and Kristen Brewster, who have done invaluable work in making these kinds of things run without a hitch. Okay, so without further ado, I'll introduce our two speakers. They have been engaged in the creation of affordable multifamily housing on the East Coast for a number of years, and both are based in Richmond, Virginia. They're going to talk about the trends that they see in developing multifamily housing as they've experienced it, both before the pandemic and coming out of it. Nick Cooper, AIA, is a principal and design director for HKS Richmond. His nearly 20-year career has focused on mixed-use, commercial, multifamily, adaptive reuse, healthcare, and civic projects, emphasizing a cross-sector influence where the most innovative solutions emerge. He is involved in Richmond's storefront for community design and is a co-director of Citizen HKS, the firm's public interest design and community engagement initiative. BERNARD HARKLESS is a developer with Lynx Ventures, a Richmond-based real estate development and investment firm. He has design, planning, and construction experience along the East Coast, working on a variety of projects, from affordable housing and luxury condos to large-scale institutional projects. He's focused on projects that offer sustained economic and social opportunities for urban communities. BERNARD has a bachelor's degree in architecture from the University of Virginia and master's degree in urban planning and development from MIT. Welcome, BERNARD and Nick.
We're definitely thankful to be here. BERNARD and myself, we've been working closely together for the last several years. We're excited to kind of, talk through the trends before and after COVID in terms of multifamily design and have a discussion. We were adamant about having these mini case study series to talk through and give you an example of what we've been doing in Richmond. But we know we have to do this together, and there's lessons learned from all sides, and we're here to learn from you all and gain questions and answers and insights as much as you all are from us. And so the only way we're going to solve the attainable housing challenge is by doing it together and learning from each other and growing from each other. So with that, we thought it would be great if we could start with a video to inspire you all about the first case study we're going to talk about. So if you just give me 1 second, I'm going to share my video. Citizen HKS is our opportunity to give back to communities around the world, whether it's through project work, whether it's through monthly service efforts at the local level through every office, or whether it's through fundraising and pulling a project to the finish line. Citizen HKS is our way to give back to people most in need. Through month of service, we worked, at Storefront for Community Design, and after a couple of years, we said, well, this is great to kind of give back during that month of service, but how can we do a project in Richmond? How can we bring Citizen HKS's 1% pro bono services to Richmond? And that's when Benefield and Highland Park community was born.
It's in a central location for the community to come in and have space to innovate, create, volunteer, get resources. This is their space. I think that's the number one thing I know myself as being a community engagement specialist here, is to let the community know that. We have some members from the community over there now painting the benches to go, by the bus stops. Now that people in the community can feel a part, and that's the whole thing, building up the city to include the residents that's in the city.
So we pitched the idea of renovating the remaining space, really having the building become an anchor for the community based on the geographic location of sitting in the middle of a large roundabout, and providing it as a space for the community and with the community. It's not just a project of, we know what's best for you, and so here are our designs. The designs are responsive to what the community is asking for.
Innovation lies in diverse perspectives and coming together towards a common role and vision and goal. And we're facilitators of that. We can do that. It's about building relationships, and it doesn't just, happen at the surface. You have to continually embed yourself in the work in the community and do what's right. In the end, we have to look out for each other and make sure that we all grow together, right? Thank you all for watching that video. We put that together for many fronts. The first front was to fundraise for the project, and where we are today is current fundraising. But the point of the story is it's been a long journey, and I know there's a lot of conversation around community engagement, what that means. We know community engagement can mean a lot of different things through a lot of different projects, and so we'll touch on that a little bit. But first, we want to talk about the project specifically and give you some insight on what we've been talking about before and after COVID and what has changed. And, like Megan was talking about our client with Boaz and Ruth, this project sits at the intersection of a lot of wonderful things in Highland Park. And Highland Park is just north of our city. It's a very underserved neighborhood that needs some revitalization, but revitalization that won't gentrify, that will support the existing fabric and people. And our charge was really to dig into the neighborhood and understand through their lens what was needed. And the project is a catalyst for more. It's not just about the four walls. It's about doing more for the community and filling some needs, in addition to the affordable housing that we're showing. And so, like I said before, the great kind of foundation of this project is all about process. It's all about community engagement. We wrapped our arms around that effort for a solid year and said, well, let's do this right. Let's design with the community and not for them. And through that avenue, we not only developed the program, we developed the unit mix that was appropriate to support that community and be a generational wealth building opportunity. getting into kind of the nuts and bolts of things, this was our ground floor pre-COVID plan. And like the video had suggested, we're working with a space that's currently occupied at the very southern eastern tip of the project, the building called 6PIC. It's composed of 6 nonprofit organizations coming together for youth empowerment. And so how can we build on that? We talked about a white space, makerspace program to support them and be that generational gap filler that we saw through community engagement, while also creating retail opportunities for local businesses to build that wealth in the community. The other big design intent was for this parking lot or drop-off area in the front of the building to be this urban room for the community. And again, we've always been about health and wellness in terms of architecture and design, but what COVID has really told us is we need more access to nature, access to parks. And this is a redlined neighborhood. We needed to go a little bit more bold on that. And you'll see from the pre-COVID ground floor plan to the post-COVID ground floor plan. And again, this is just in schematics still while we fundraise, but we were intentional with gaining even more green space in front of the building. And the other thing that we were intentional with is before we were starting to look at a space that was a communal space, but we realized that communal space was already there with 6PIC. So how can we incorporate the middle part of the plan to be more dynamic and more fitting to kind of a co-work or WeWork model? So again, it would support local businesses not needing actual space to for a storefront, but actually a space to do their work and collaborate with the community. So those were some of the foundational changes that we made before and after at the ground floor level. And again, the commercial space adjusted a little bit, but there's still that need for that commercial space in this neighborhood specifically. And I know COVID is kind of reshaping our office strategy and that sort of thing, but in pockets, and it's all neighborhood specific, there are intentional needs for this space to activate the ground floor. And so if we continue up, this is really where it got interesting. Before COVID, we were talking about a mix of units, right? Where you had studios and 1-bedrooms and your typical 2-bedrooms. And then we talked about a micro unit opportunity in the corner of the project. We talked about supporting programs like child daycare, which kind of went away because there's already a daycare service there that we didn't want to take away from that entity. But then we started talking about a community garden. And more green space. And we started having these conversations about balconies. And as much as we do, is balcony strategy is always one of the things you need to solve for. Is it 50% of units that need balconies? Is it 100%? What is that blend? And before COVID, we were kind of stuck on this 50%. But after COVID, we realized that we need to incorporate more opportunities to get outside. And the other thing that changed completely this plan was the opportunity to take that micro living or that co-living model and expand it and make it the bold move of the plan. And so this whole plan was reshaped in the form of how do we create community, right? During COVID, and going through all of these, virtual conversations, there was this lack of belonging, sense of community. So there was this big intent to grab that through this project. The other thing that shaped the change of our project was gaining twice as much space for outdoor communal garden space as what we were previously showing. So we were not only keeping the unit count per floor because we went to the smaller unit typology, but we also gained twice as much exterior space to give that health and wellness and access to nature out to our community and typical floor plan. And then also we gave every single unit access to a balcony. And so the last thing that I'll expand on before I hand it over to my partner in crime here, Bernard, is the other thing that we started to look at was a healthy material strategy. And I want to give a big shout out to Parsons Material Lab, Healthy Materials Lab, because they were a wonderful partner with us in the beginning of the year, trying to vet, how do we incorporate the most healthy materials for this project for affordable housing and not just be accessible to for-profit for rent and market rate apartments. So that was a big push that we made as well. And one of the pieces that we started to explore with the small units of these micro units, how can we take one piece of an element like a furniture solution and bake in the kitchenette, bake in the closet, bake in a little work from home desk, right? So those things that we were seeing that people are starting to want to stay at home and work from home at least 60% of the time, even through and after COVID. How do we incorporate that into our plan? And so that was a big conversation as well. And so I'll pass it on over to Bernard to talk about some of the key development takeaways for the project.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. So to Nick's point, the approach of this project has been generally around, imagining something different, something new, a new model of living, new model of working with community engagement input. But the other side of that too, from a development perspective, is how can you think about affordability in new ways and financing mechanisms to achieve different types of outcomes? I know Nick had mentioned that it's still in schematic design phase because of fundraising and things like that, but there's such a need, as everyone knows, for affordable housing throughout the nation, and specifically in Richmond. And trying to really crack the nut on how do you really provide housing in innovative ways to the people that need it most. So the 20 or 30% of AMI, which is just historically always hard to finance in projects. So that's just something as it relates to this project specifically, is trying to find the right partners, as Nick said, but being very engaged in the community, and also trying to find the right banks, the right equity providers, potentially the right contractors, people that really share that vision and want to get creative around finding new ways to develop a different type of product and model for what community revitalization with community input actually looks like. Specifically as it relates, we are in Richmond, Virginia, and most of you are a New Hampshire crowd. So just kind of a key takeaway to keep in mind is, on the affordable, Lynx Ventures does a lot of affordable housing, and part of this is, how can you think about new tools from a policy perspective to achieve outcomes as well? You need the capital, you need the design partners, and you need the contractors to help execute these things. But the localities are a huge advocate and stakeholder in these things as well. So trying to think about new ways to knit all of those things together in ways that are new and innovative. And it's, as Nick alluded to, it's a lot of hard work, but to get to the outcomes I think we all want, those are the kind of things that it takes.
Thanks, Bernard. So I think we wanted to open it up to Q&A, but I wanted to leave you with one other thing as well. This project and our client, to her credit, and Boaz and Ruth, we always talk about what our goals are and what our clients' goals are and how can we achieve those. And to her credit, she wanted this project to be as as environmentally responsible as socially responsible. And I tell you this for one big reason is we were looking at a net zero opportunity for this project. And, obviously what COVID has kind of pushed us to look for is more intentionality around natural ventilation and ways to kind of create a safer environment for our buildings. So, some of those things is great for our industry, as you know, because we need to be mindful of the environment in a wonderful way, in a more intentional way. But COVID has certainly influenced the trajectory of that thinking. So,
Great, thank you, Nick and Bernard. So I'll throw a couple questions your way, and members of the audience, if you have questions you'd like to have answered, you can still drop them into the chat. But I'll get us started here, and I guess I would just ask. Well, one question that came to mind for me, and apparently some others, was just seeing those photos of the community outreach and engagement. It looks like it happened pre-COVID, and so being mindful of the digital divide that exists in both urban and rural areas. Has that outreach continued through the pandemic? Has it adapted to some extent? We can all probably guess. but how has your approach to it changed, knowing that you can't always reach people in the way that you used to?
I can speak directly to Benefield, and then Bernard, maybe you'll talk a little bit about the Bank of America process, because that was pretty successful. But I will say, you know, this project specifically has such a long community engagement process where we have done a lot of in-person, you know, community events. It was imperative because we were going through some significant changes, as you could see from before COVID and after COVID, and we need to have the community buy-in from every moment. And so we had virtual sessions where it was Zoom meetings. We presented the changes, and this is really where one of the biggest pushes came from in terms of the unit mix. They said they needed more 2 bedrooms or units that would accommodate single head of household families with children. And we did a major pivot, and it was through those virtual Zoom meetings that we came to that resolution. They were as important as the early meetings. And I will say, you know, obviously we tried our best to make it accessible to all. We recorded the sessions and made them available as well. So again, I go back to, you know, community engagement means so much to different people. I'll say, you know, continual community engagement results in trust and community building first and foremost. So I would encourage everyone to not just do that one-off and say goodbye and design your building, but embed yourself in the community.
Yeah, and I guess one thing to kind of tag on to Nick, I'm on the board with him at the Storefront for Community Design as well, and just something that we observed through kind of the COVID environment is, you know, to Nick's point, we think of community engagement as, you know, investing in relationships, not just we've got this project and we need to go get community input. So for us, you know, the Maggie Walker Community Land Trust, which is the land trust here in Richmond, was gifted a building by Bank of America, and they had hired Storefront for Community Design to kind of help work on the community engagement process. So, you know, that was done by the deep relationships that we had on the team of people that were in the neighborhood already, and kind of knew these families, knew the youth, and was able to kind of get feedback and assemble a group of people virtually for us to get the feedback that we needed to kind of move forward with what those uses would be.
Great. Okay, well, I've got another question or two, but I think we're running a little bit behind schedule, so maybe it makes sense to jump into the next section, and then some of these questions will probably be applicable to other bits of the presentation as well. Nick, your presentation is no longer in the full screen mode, so if you want to put it back in projector mode, there you go.
Thank you.
We can launch into part 2.
All right.
Perfect. So just a little bit about Lynx Ventures. We tend to take a holistic development philosophy of how we think about things, from community engagement to housing to jobs and kind of all those things. So I know as some of you are probably like, well, what Richmond is much larger than my town in New Hampshire, whatever it may be. So what I try to do is kind of just talk about more a holistic perspective, and which I think is relevant for you guys as well. So we primarily work in a neighborhood on the south side of the river, just adjacent to downtown in Richmond, called Manchester, and bought a bunch of land 20 years ago there, which is kind of the slide here is just a catalog of kind of some of the things that we've bought over time, and some other things that have been developed. But it's kind of typical to probably some New Hampshire towns. You know, Richmond had a great stock of historic buildings that have been converted into apartments and creative office space and things like that. So with that, you know, we to the point on COVID, what you know, our housing philosophy is, you know, the housing's only as good as the jobs, right? So an example of that is we have some old Philip Morris tobacco warehouses that we bought about 2 or 3 years ago, and we kind of came up with that there was definitely a need in the food and beverage space for just for space, for resources and things like that. So it's called Hatch, and I think Nick, you have the next slide there. So I say all this because I know we're talking about multifamily, but what was very interesting is we had 60 food and beverage businesses that were kind of running in this kitchen, and we were very concerned about, are they going to be able to survive? What are we going to do? And kind of the opposite happened. We had all these businesses that were thriving and actually hiring and growing through the pandemic, which has the downstream effects of people actually being able to pay their rent and actually doing things that are benefits to the multifamily that we have. So as part of that, taking that holistic philosophy, we want to try and marry all those things together, taking that approach. Secondly, we have a project called Plant Zero, which here again, it started with some artist studios, and just kind of seeing how that was kind of the linchpin and the starting point for kind of this whole redevelopment over the years, and seeing how those spaces have also changed kind of over time and even throughout COVID. What started as artist studios transitioned and morphed into graphic design studios, or photography studios, or other businesses that aren't just people painting or sculpting, right? Which has been a huge benefit to, here again, the multifamily that we put around it. So really trying to create this walkability in this environment, in this community, that it's not just about where I sleep at night. It's I work, or my creative office space is across the street from my apartment building, and just that notion of taking the long-term perspective as it relates to those things. And then we have our Clopton Site Works, which is actually where Hatch is located, and here again, I think when COVID had hit, I think every real estate developer or owner was concerned around what's happening to businesses, are people going to be able to pay rent, and all of these things. And it's been really great to see the investment that we've made in our tenants, and their ability to be nimble, and us working together as a team, right, to actually make sure that we can still achieve the outcomes we need, and vice versa, but being understanding that we're kind of all in this together, and we're in a changing environment, and how people are working is changing, and their needs are changing. So how can we be nimble and think through kind of what that looks like to have the most impact that we can have. And then we have the New Manchester Flats project, and we always talk about this because it's a great example of true kind of oasis mixed use to a certain extent, because it's an extremely deep affordability. We've got 30% of AMI all the way up to 120% of AMI. So just kind of over time repositioning these office and studios and medical and kind of all these uses together, you're really leveraging all these uses and the synergies that are created in creating this environment. So we just completed the last phase of this, 104 units of low-income housing tax credit, 4% tax-exempt bond project. And some of the things that we tried to work into that were a much larger bike shelter, right? Like there's just more people that were biking. There was more jobs being created in the Manchester submarket. So people trying to Nick's point, outdoor space, being outdoors, trying to be cognizant of creating those spaces for people as they're looking to rent these things. And also, we always like using this project because Richmond is not New York or Chicago or any of these other major markets. So it is exponentially growing, which is amazing. And there's so much opportunity to think about these neighborhoods in new ways and work with the community. But Richmond's also a market where you kind of have to do more with less, right? Which is probably similar to New Hampshire to some extent. So really thinking about the financing of these things, really thinking about the partnerships that are needed to really make these projects successful and innovative. So we use almost every type of financing possible, new market tax credits, historic tax credits, tax exempt bonds, tax credit equity for the LIHTC side. So trying to think about your projects in this way of, we have all these moving pieces, and how can we put them all together to get to the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. And then lastly, this will kind of segue to our next section, but this is a project we're currently working on now. It's called The Current, and it's mixed use. It's about a $75 million project. I know you're probably looking at this and saying, this doesn't fit in New Hampshire. But I use this as an example because we had we built 70,000 spec office building, and then COVID happened, and everyone knows what happened to the office market, right? Fast forward where now we have probably about 70% of our office building lease. We had a huge tenant that relocated to the submarket. And a huge driver for them was, I wanted new construction. I want the touchless sensors. I want a lot of light. Can you talk to me about your HVAC system and your filtration and things like that? So we've been seeing through this project, and just kind of as we're coming out of COVID, just things that people are looking for as it relates to this project. We've got a huge bike room, a 26 electric vehicle charging stations, which is kind of unprecedented to have that many. But people are just really thinking more holistically about, what does it mean to live and work? What does it mean? What are these environments? How close am I to being to the outdoors? This submarket, we're about a 5-minute walk to the James River. So just kind of seeing how these things have morphed and changed, and then the downstream effects of us kind of making these changes, even though we're under construction, changing out to touchless fixtures in public spaces, and thinking about kind of elevator access control, so maybe people don't have to touch buttons, and just trying to think about those things that we laugh about it now as everyone is becoming vaccinated and people are coming out, but there are some things that we'll touch on a little bit later that I think are here to stay from a multifamily design standpoint as people think about these projects. So with that, trying to be mindful of time here, we'll take some more questions. Well, I guess one last thing, since this slide is here, to the point on policy that is interesting, being very clear about vision and needs and resources is great. So this is a snapshot from the Richmond 300 City Master Plan that just actually won the American Planning Association Plan of the Year award. Just trying to be clear and working with stakeholders to achieve outcomes for the vision of the city.
Cool, thank you, Bernard and Nick. So we've got a couple more questions in the chat, and I'm going to try to sort of summarize them and ask you to speak to them. And I think you'll have some discretion, since you've shown us a couple of different projects, to choose those examples that you feel like best, or maybe illustrate the point best. A couple of our attendees here, Stephanie Hurley, North Sturdivant, Melissa Rodriguez, had some questions about unit mix. Part of it is they're wondering how, in the case of Benefield, you evaluated the community's need in terms of smaller units versus larger units for families, perhaps, but also specific to affordability. And Bernard, maybe you could speak to that one. You went over a couple of examples that had sort of complex blends of market rate and lower, more deeply targeted units. So how did you arrive at that unit mix? What's the rent discount like relative to market for some of those targeted units? And how's it, to the extent that some of those might have been introduced, how's it working? It's been interesting in our experience in New Hampshire to see the various experiences with mixed income projects around the state. Some of them work terrific, and some of them are pretty challenging because perhaps the affordable units, while they have a narrow income window, don't provide a huge discount relative to the market rent. And in other situations, there's a steep discount, but the income thresholds are so low that it's not always easy to fill units despite the need. So again, I think you've got some choices there and where you want to go with answering those questions. But which one of you wants to take that?
Yeah, I guess, or Nick, do you want to jump in first?
I was just going to speak to the unit mix real quick, and it was obviously the first pass at unit mix was from our client directly. Boaz and Ruth has a number of projects in the neighborhood already, and they were looking at what units would differentiate Benefield from their other stock of units. One thing that they do have is micro units, but some of them don't have a kitchenette. And so, for example, that was kind of the baseline for what our micro unit needed to have, right? A little kitchenette to give you some access and availability for meal prep. And then, obviously through a couple community engagement work sessions and polling, we asked specifically size. What's too small? What's too big? What are the optimum bedroom count that you'd like to see in this building? And that's really kind of what came about to the unit mix that we have. It's mostly 1-bedroom micro units with 2 single-family head of household units at the 2 ends. And so it's a blend of, I'd say, over 30. It's 4 and 26. So.
Yeah, I guess
Thanks.
just on a technical side of things, without getting into like too much detail, the unit size and income, and as you guys know, in New Hampshire, like there's a trade-off. These things are generally a function of the financing mechanism and tools that you're trying to use. I will say that something that has changed is to the point earlier around kind of partnerships and just the development overview of Benefield more generally, but this is definitely a global comment as well. There are much more firms that are out on the equity side or on the debt side even that are interested in affordability, like the deep affordability, because to your point, people say, well, that's really not affordable. I still can't afford it. How can you go deeper? So, we've been having a lot of conversations with our New Manchester Flats project utilized income averaging, right? So we went down, which is relatively new. I think it's been around maybe a year or so, 18 months. But trying to really get a little bit deeper on the affordability spectrum as opposed to just doing everything is 60%, right? We're gonna have some 80s, we'll have some 70s, maybe we can get down to 40 and 30 even to really try and blend those to that AMI that like works with our financing and things like that. So I think everyone had a rough year with COVID and other things, and I think they're coming out of that thinking about new ways of people have really struggled with from affordability with job loss, just various things from an economic standpoint. So there's definitely more funds and more people interested in trying to fill those gaps of, well, I want your project to have 20% units. Well, maybe I can fill that financing need for those units in a way that's maybe a little bit different than it's traditionally done.
Right. Do you have, for those deeply targeted units, do most of them or many of them have rental assistance through the local housing authority or some other mechanism?
So the one thing I'll say, I would say probably a little bit less so through the housing authority, but what is a little unique that is a key takeaway that we were going to touch on a little bit later as it relates to kind of affordable housing and the affordable housing playbook. Richmond just recently started the Partnership for Housing Affordability, and it's kind of the first time that the whole region has really come together, City of Richmond, but also the surrounding counties. And they have gotten some money from some major corporations here and have started the housing resource line for that purpose exactly. Hey, I'm struggling with my rent payment, like what resources are out there? Or hey, I'm getting kicked out of my home, where can I go? So to your point, that is a new resource that has seen tremendous growth through COVID as people are struggling to stay in their housing and things are tight. It's like, hey, I need assistance. How can you help me? And it's whether it's pointing them to the resource or having financial wherewithal themselves to help with that extra $100 for that month or whatever it is. Trying to really set people up to be able to stay in their housing and be successful.
Right. Great. Well, maybe we should move on now to the third part of the presentation. So, Nick, do you want to advance the slide? Thank you.
Good. Yeah, thanks, Ron.
Yeah, so this is a project in Winchester, Virginia, that we, Lynx got involved in probably 18 months ago or so. And we actually hired HKS as our architect on this project. And we just thought it was a great opportunity to one, talk about Winchester, but we had some design changes and things that kind of were real time responding to COVID and some of the research that HKS had done through their clients and through their projects to kind of see what these changing demographics and things mean for the actual like output of the product. Our Winchester project is kind of a public-private partnership. The EDA had a little corner site of 0.3 acres and had wanted to redevelop it. They demoed an old hotel building there probably 6 or 7 years ago, and the site is essentially ground zero for Winchester. It's right across from a beautiful, adaptably renovated Hotel George Washington. So we came in and have kind of partnered with the city in a way that's, you know, hey, we're going to partner with you guys and the adjacent landowner to kind of put together a full two city block, 2 acre kind of master development that has about 172, 174 units. I forget. It's been a while. So really talking about, you know, and Nick will talk a little bit about this as it relates to the design changes, but you know, typical mixed ground floor retail with you know, podium with 4 stories of stick above, with a precast parking deck. Just kind of as you can see here, this is a general kind of site plan that we had here. So really trying to knit these 2 blocks together, having some green space, really kind of softening these edges and providing that green space and that permeability between kind of 2 blocks as we connected things. Nick, do you want to go through the?
Yeah. Thanks, Bernard. I mean, this has been quite a wonderful opportunity just because of, you know, studying a wonderful, you know, town like Winchester, Virginia, and this is one of the bigger projects in Winchester, I'll say, if not the biggest. And so we were really adamant about not only kind of making sure we fit into the vernacular of Winchester, but being mindful of scale. And you know, to Lynx's and Bernard's credit, they were very adamant about making sure that we were mindful of, you know, putting 180 units on this site and not feeling like 180 units. And so a couple things that even before and after COVID, it's all about placemaking in terms of, you know, multifamily, in terms of architecture and design in general. The ground floor plan, activating that, connecting blocks, you know, making great urban space. And this is where it was really exciting because, you know, there's some properties that we did not own, so we needed to kind of work around those constraints. But, you know, working through those constraints unlocked some of the best parts of the project. And, you know, I'll get into some of those things. But in terms of the unit planning is really, you know, what Bernard was saying is we were kind of adapting on the fly. And I want to give all the credit in the world to our research team that's spread around our firm. But you know, ever since COVID started, they were pulling data, not only from our employees, but from our clients, from our neighborhoods, from our cities, and making sure we were as well informed as anyone. And so we started to adapt our units in 2 ways. One, we were adding back to the unit mix a little bit more 1-bedrooms plus dens. So we'd give our future tenants the opportunity to work from home, right? And have this unit mix be a little bit more blended in terms of bigger units. And then, as you can see in this diagram with the highlight in magenta, we have this facade that's a pretty long facade, and architects like to kind of you know, give a little bit more definition to a long facade like that. And we had a strategy around balconies, of course, and again, it was the whole balcony conversation where, you know, we know they're a little bit more of an added cost. You know, that's why traditionally it's been like a 50% or 50% ratio for balcony to unit. Blend, but we pushed harder. We wanted a little bit more access to nature for our units. I think we're at 75 to 80, and it's a mix of Juliets to outboard to inboard. You know, understanding the balance between economics and design intent is something we're really adamant about. But then again, you know, even if we can make small increments during our design process, where we extended the balcony to the south, which you're seeing here, and then baking in kind of this working from home desk opportunity to give you some space, to give you, well, if you don't want it to be a desk, maybe it's just a larger bedroom for you, but giving them this differentiated product type within their floor plate is really important. And again, you know, talking about, you know, COVID and what it kind of showed us, not only in terms of unit blend, but in terms of site infrastructure, in terms of sidewalk depth, in terms of the ability for your your amenity or your retailer to spill out to the sidewalk and activate that street and give that sense of safety where you're out to get to the open air. So that was really a big driver for us as we were trying to kind of maximize that building edge to the sight line. We wanted to push it back and give that space for outdoor dining and outdoor activity. You know, this one is kind of at a blend of the two concepts, obviously, where we were pushing harder on balcony strategy, but also creating these in-between spaces, right? It doesn't have to, you don't have to create outdoor space by a grand big outdoor kind of plaza or outdoor, you know, green space. It can be interspersed, right? And that's what we were seeing as well. You can have different types of outdoor space to give people options and to spread people around the site is another strategy that we were really reinforcing. These pocket parks that serve different functions. So again, it would give Bernard and Lynx an opportunity to differentiate these spaces and brand them as something specific to different audiences. And then again, here's that long facade against the railroad. So how do we do two things? How do we mitigate the sounds? And we did that a couple different ways by reducing the amount of glazing on that face, but also create this pocket park, this park that could be a simple you know, dog park. Again, creating these amenities for not only the internal community, but the external community to enjoy as well. And then lastly, I want to talk about adaptability because adaptability goes back to some of our research as well. And I know, you know, people aren't, you know, as fortunate to kind of work through the design process right now with their multifamily units, but there are so many strategies that you can take to adapt them to some of the lessons learned that we've seen through our research. But, you know, in terms of, you know, respecting the existing vernacular, it was one of the best opportunities to kind of preserve this historic wall and create kind of some unique units behind that. And then lastly, you know, materiality. You know, I know there's a big point of, you know, I'm a very big advocate for contextual architecture and putting projects in places where they never could succeed elsewhere. And so how could we take some of the buildings that are dilapidated and need to take down to make room for this and repurpose their materials? And so whether that's through site furnishings or parts of the project in other ways, how can we celebrate the history of the place? And so adapting to kind of what we were given to something new is important to us. And so I want to end on two things for this conversation is our research. And you know, one of the benefits of kind of working from 24 different offices around the country is I can pick up the phone and call Greg out of LA or Alex out of Atlanta or Mike out of DC and compare notes. And that's what we did. We did that regularly. We said, what are your neighborhoods? You know, what are your clients talking about? What are the pinch points? What are the challenges? So how can we start to think a little bit better across the regions and being more informed? Obviously, there's things that are going to be so market, you know, and regional kind of centric that you need to have boots on the ground, and you need to have that localized kind of understanding of the ecosystems that make affordable housing work. But there's things that you can translate across regions. And so one of the things that, you know, we saw, obviously we expanded on this a couple times already, is balconies, you know, pushing more towards, you know, not only balconies in terms of access to nature and health and wellness, but in terms of like community building. You've seen all the videos of different environments from all across Europe and where there's so many balconies kind of together, where there'd be, you know, concerts, people would be singing to each other and just kind of building that sense of community. And I believe that's what we should be doing as well, not just building buildings, but building a sense of community. Balconies are that avenue to do so. And so the other thing I'd like to show you is kind of the research and adaptability of your existing units. So how can you adapt them to be more conducive to working from home? Because, you know, I flex over to commercial office and I know that the office will never die for various reasons. I mean, office is about culture building, it's about mentorship, it's about belonging, it's about collaboration. But there is data, hard data that, you know, at least for HKS, 60% of our employees want to work from home 2 days of the week. So how do we empower them to do that? And how do we create that opportunity through our multifamily projects? And it comes back to kind of creating a hierarchy of spaces or priority of where that wants to be. And how can we show our clients, well, here's an option for it to be right inside your common space, or here's an option to kind of reduce the space for your bedroom and incorporate it into a more private setting. So we were pretty adamant about getting this content to our clients and showing them how they can be flexible with their content. And so all of this research kind of led us to, well, how can we kind of start to create a playbook, quote unquote, or a case study or a set of principles that we can not only learn from each other, but expand outward and provide people a framework for successful, attainable housing. And what does that look like? And so this is in the beta version. You all are seeing it for the very first time. We're having plenty of conversations on what it looks like. And again, we know that this is just a framework. There's going to be lots of things that are, that you can take from place to place, but there's some things that you just have to know at your market and understand the conditions on the ground, be part of that localized ecosystem. But we're just excited to kind of put a framework together to tackle this challenge for our communities and for our world. So I want to flip it back to Bernard for his perspective before we open it up to Q&A.
Yeah, I think just one thing to add is just, as Nick has touched on, we've talked about already. This is about the future, right? We've seen COVID. COVID has changed how people are living and working and things like that. So, how can we really start to make meaningful change by putting a framework together that can be replicated and used, whatever the jurisdiction, but just everything is not, as to Nick's point. What's relevant in Richmond may not be totally relevant in the town of New Hampshire per se, but the hope is to get different stakeholders, different groups, different policymakers together to think holistically about affordable housing, right? To my points earlier, if you take the approach that housing is only good as the services that you put with it, it means that you need to have partners that are contributing to this framework as well, to make sure things are designed efficiently, make sure that things are located properly to achieve the outcomes that we're looking to achieve.
Thanks, Bernard, and thank you all. Let's open it up to Q&A.
Great. Thanks, Nick. And Bernard, I don't see your face anymore, but now I do again, so great. We've got one or two more questions, and I know we're nearing the 5 o'clock hour. Maybe we'll allow ourselves a few minutes over, but we won't go too late. So thanks for that last case study. I don't know that I've seen a more dramatic reinvention of a building than that. And actually, to your, so I think my first question that I'll throw out here is about the look of the buildings, which there's no question they're beautiful. I think to a layperson, they might, you might describe them as modern. And so I imagine that both of you have encountered the kind of sort of community resistance that a lot of our developers have encountered when they come in with bold and sometimes beautiful designs, which is, yeah, we'd like something that's a little more traditional looking. So it looks like you guys have, if you've encountered that kind of argument, you've won it. And so I just want to hear more about how you do that.
Want to take that one first, Bernard, or shall I go?
Yeah, I can take that first. I think at Lynx, we care a lot about quality of our development projects. So, we want to do community engagement. We want to be engaged in the neighborhoods we work in. We want to have things that are differentiated from the product type. Like we tend to not think of apartments or industrial property as commodities, right? Like we want to do something that is going to be distinguishable and differentiated, because we think there's value in that, and inherently is better for the community. So what we found in our experience is, because we care about quality and we care about the products that we're putting in, that it's really more of a listen and learn and a give and take with officials and the community. It's like, hey, well, I hear you, but we're going to do this because this is for this reason. And I think there's a trust that at the end of the day, we can disagree on aesthetics, but we have a track record of doing great projects and that have been significant in the neighborhoods that we work in. So I think that buys that, and it's bought us a little bit of credibility in the sense of, we're not necessarily known for just slapping together stuff that is not beautiful, or or taking an approach to something that we're just going to come in here and do what we want and you guys have to deal with it. That's just kind of not our development approach.
Yeah, and I'll give credit where credit is due. I mean, Lynx and Bernard has taken a lot of iterations to the city and making sure that we're on the right path, and other community stakeholders, specifically to Winchester. And I'll elaborate it on a little bit more. Obviously, it may or may not look more modern than what you're used to, but I look at it from a couple different perspectives. So for Winchester, there was some real intentionality around materiality. And so what are the materials that are around us? What are the materials that we're taking away with the demolition of the buildings? How can we reuse those materials to pay homage back to the history? How can we, and I wish I had included that slide, but how can we take moments of the vernacular and include it in parts and pieces, and then be more streamlined or of the time, I'll say, with the materials that we're seeing, with the research that we're seeing, and hold up to that quality and hold up to that blend, that fine line of design intent and affordability. So I think it's very project specific. With Bennettfield, if you notice, there was a specific point of view for form, where we were paying homage back to the A-frame vernacular behind us, because our project backs up to a single family home. And so it was important for us to kind of extend that elevation, if you will, and create that unification. But then also, with you may or may not see, but we wanted to celebrate the Art Deco facade in front. So we wanted to have intentionality around all of our materials that we would propose are taking back seat to that, and it's kind of the backdrop to that historical facade.
Great, thank you. So it sounds like trust is important, and being able to explain the design thinking behind the design of these buildings can probably go some way towards establishing that credibility with maybe people who aren't as familiar. That certainly makes sense to me. We're coming up on the 5 o'clock hour. I think maybe I'll close with one final question, which is a little bit less specific to this topic, but since your presentation has been about, it's been about design and construction, but it's really been about engaging with community and determining what it is that they want and need to help them figure out how to solve those questions and problems. I'd like to ask both of you, how has this experience, whether it's Bennettfield or the other projects that you've highlighted here, how has working with those communities made you think about your own community differently, if at all? Has it changed the way that you engage with your own community? Any thoughts on that?
Gosh, I don't like to call myself an architect, because I feel like I'm a community builder. I feel like I'm invested in where I live and what I do and where I do it. And so I think nothing has changed for me, to be honest, because I want to work with others to realize dreams and realize the potential of what we're trying to do, whether that's at Bennettfield, at Richmond, or Winchester, DC, or in my own community, where we're building fences together, or we're building better green space together, or making our neighborhoods more walkable, bikeable. Nothing's changed.
Yeah, I'd say the same thing as Nick. My partner Rick will say, we've been doing this stuff for a long time. A lot of the neighborhoods where we work are opportunity zones, and people say, oh, you're an opportunity zone developer. It's like we've been in these neighborhoods for a long time, kind of developing relationships and trust and building buildings, right? So I think for us, it's still just been more of the same, and just really trying to continue moving forward in ways that are significant, that are going to make our city better, as Nick said. So.
Right. Well, it's a beautiful city. I can see from the imagery. I can't say I've ever been to Richmond, but I hope to get to visit sometime. Thank you so much to both of you for your presentations, for taking the time, and for sharing your experiences. And thanks to everybody in the audience for attending this afternoon. We will send out an email tomorrow with a link to the video and the slides, as well as a link to register for next week's program if you'd like, with Kendra Halliwell, Rebecca Hatfield, and James Peterson. I do want to say briefly, if you in the audience have any ideas for presentations that you'd like us to be considering, topics that you feel like we should be highlighting, or voices that we should be elevating here at New Hampshire Housing, we're always open to those kinds of suggestions. So please contact me or any one of your friends in the management development or policy and planning divisions. With that, I hope you all have a good evening. Thanks again, Nick and Bernard, and to the team at New Hampshire Housing that put this together. Goodbye.